do have a new staff member for the division. He's working in the abandoned mine reclamation program. And if David Jones, would you stand up, please? So David Jones has been hired into the AML program with as a project manager. He grew up in the Lake District of Northwest England and studied at Durham University, where he obtained a Bachelor of Science in Physical Geography. He has over 4 years of experience as a GIS specialist with a focus on hydrology and flood risk mapping. And you'll appreciate this, Mr. Hansen. He, in his spare time, he goes outside a lot and goes climbing and mountain biking. So there you go. Thanks, David.
Welcome. I think you'll enjoy it.
The first item on our briefing agenda this morning is to have a annual presentation and report by Rio Tinto Kennecott Bingham Mine. And to do that, I'm going to ask Steve Schnorr and Trevor Heaton to come up, and they're seated in the first row here.
Okay,
and they'll be conducting the presentation, and I'll let you guys figure out which order you're going to go in.
Okay. Before you start, is there anyone here that will be addressing this issue so that we can make sure we figure out how we're going to proceed? If you'd like to make a comment on this, would you raise your hand? I'm not seeing anyone, but there's a big pillar right here. I see one hand. Okay.
Are you asking only about the Kennecott issue or other issues?
No, the Kennecott issue.
No.
Okay. All right. Then I know how to proceed. So, welcome. If you'd...
Mr. Chairman, I needed to make one general announcement that I forgot about, and that is that they're testing the fire alarms in the building this morning. So if you hear the fire alarm go off, don't panic. We can remain seated. It's just a testing routine going on. So okay. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. Proceed.
Yeah, thank you. We at Rio Tinto Kennecott look forward to our annual presentations to the board as part of our contract with the board. I'm Steve Schnorr, Manager of Environment, Land and Water for Rio Tinto Kennecott, and with me today is Trevor Heaton, Senior Reclamation Engineer. Why we're here is threefold. First, to present last year's reclamation and our reclamation plan for 2018, which is required with the board contract. Second, we're going to delve into the board contract in a little more depth than we have in the past. And third, we're going to show how Rio Tinto, through its philosophy of concurrent and proactive reclamation, is meeting its contractual obligations. A little about Bingham Canyon Mine. The Bingham Canyon Mine has been in operation for 115 years. And throughout that 115 years, it's been one of the largest copper producers in the world, producing over 20 million tons of copper. The Bingham Canyon Mine, Rio Tinto's Bingham Canyon Mine, currently produces, is the second largest copper producer in the United States, and we're producing roughly 13% of the annual needs for the U.S. The Bingham Canyon Mine, over that 115 years, has been one of the largest private economic contributors to the state of Utah. A little about Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto purchased Kennecott in 1989. Rio Tinto is a global mining company. We have 48 mines and processing facilities across 35 countries, spanning 6 continents. Our North American activities focused on both Canada and the U.S. In the U.S., we have 3 large projects, and those are the boron operations in California, the Resolution Copper Project in Arizona, and most importantly, and why we're here today, the Bingham Canyon Mine here in Utah.
Okay, so like Steve said, typically during this presentation we give a detailed report of the preceding year. and we set forth our reclamation
A
plan.
little closer to the mic, please.
Can you hear me now?
A lot better.
Okay. So just to repeat what I just said, typically during this presentation, we give a detailed report of our activities during the year, the preceding year, and we set forth our reclamation plan for the year to come, for the upcoming year. This is one of the requirements of our 1978 contract that Rio Tinto Kennecott has with the Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining. But unlike past years where we mostly focus on the 2017-2018 activities, we're not just going to be focusing on these activities, but we're going to give a broader context, how they fit into the broader picture. We'll be discussing some key components of the 1978 contract. We'll talk about some of the newer permits associated with some of the facilities that have been installed since the 1978 contract was in place. We'll discuss our 40-year reclamation history with an emphasis on the past 25 years since Rio Tinto purchased Kennecott. And then, in accordance with our obligations under the 1978 contract, we'll give an accounting of our 2017 reclamation activities, the associated spending with those activities, and our plans for 2018 and beyond. The 1978 contract is a contract between Rio Tinto Kennecott and the Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining. It sets forth the financial assurance for the 0002 permit. The 0002 permit is the permit that governs the Bingham Canyon mine. In addition to the 0002 permit and the financial assurance that we have in place for that 0002 permit, we have separate financial assurance instruments for other DOGM permits for other facilities that we have in the valley. Now, one thing about the 1978 contract and the financial assurance associated with that contract, it is a written contractual agreement, and it set forth a permitted form of surety that was permissible in 1978, and it continues to be a permitted form of surety today. In addition to this financial assurance and the financial assurance for our other 5 DOGM permits, we also have financial assurance in place with EPA and the Salt Lake County Health Department. This slide indicates the boundary associated with the 0002 permit. Now, like I said, the 0002 permit governs the Bingham Canyon mine operations. The Bingham Canyon mine is shown in the left. In the upper right corner, you see the Great Salt Lake. If you notice in the legend, the north arrow points to the right. The north tailings impound, or the tailings impoundment is on the north side or the right end of the 0002 permit. This slide shows some of the disturbance areas associated with the mining activities in this area. This is a historical mining district with mining activities dating back to the 1800s. And so some of the disturbance that we talk about is not necessarily disturbance that was caused by our operations. But we want to talk about how this relates to some of the reclamation activities and the 0002 permit. Not all of this disturbance area is governed under the 1978 contract or the associated 0002 permit. You have the smelter and refinery that are secondary facilities and are not governed by DOGM regulations. The North Impoundment, the North Tailings Impoundment, is governed under a separate permit and has a separate financial instrument associated with it. The Barneys Canyon mine is governed under a separate permit and a separate financial instrument. Same with Copperton Concentrator and Pine Canyon. They're governed under separate permits and have separate financial instruments in place. Now, what I'd like to do is kind of discuss our 40-year reclamation history. We'll kind of go through this reclamation history to give a broad overview, and we'll kind of walk through fairly quickly, and then we'll come back and talk about many of these projects in more detail. So in 1992, we reclaimed the Bingham Creek tailings. It was an area that was impacted by early lead miners. In 1994, we reclaimed several evaporation ponds that were located between the mine and the South Jordan City, South Jordan area. We reclaimed these, and then subsequent reclamation, we further reclaimed the area and developed the Daybreak community. Around the same time frame, 1992 to 1994, we reclaimed the Lark, Tailings, and waste rock area. This area was impacted by mining activities not associated with our operations. Throughout the years, we've reclaimed a number of railroad lines, including the Copperton High Line Railroad. Right around 1996, between 1996 and the early 2000s, we performed some demolition activities on a number of facilities and reclaimed the land and associated with those facilities. This includes the Bonneville Crusher, the North Concentrator, and the Arthur Mill. Between 1998 and 2003, we implemented reclamation on the South Tailings Impoundment. We had vegetation success on the South Tailings Impoundment that assisted us with maintaining dust and providing wildlife habitat. Between 1995, or from about 2006 to 2012, we reclaimed the lower Bingham Canyon. And from 1995 to 2002, we reclaimed the Barneys Canyon mine, waste rock areas and the pit areas associated with the Barneys Canyon mine. Now, as you can see, I just want to take a moment to point out that much of the disturbance area in the area covered by the 0002 permit, much of this disturbance area either is not covered or governed under the 1978 contract or has been previously reclaimed in the past. As you can see, much of the disturbance area that really is governed under the financial assurance tied to the 0002 permit is mostly central to just the Bingham Canyon mine disturbance. This slide shows that, and it also shows the other permitted areas, and we have financial instruments associated with these other permitted areas. These permitted areas include the North Tailings Impoundment, the Copperton Concentrator, Barneys Canyon, and Pine Canyon.
Just a question on that for the board. Go back to that one. If it's not in red, that already has a separate bond in it. Is that correct?
If it's not in red, it already has a separate bond in it.
Or them?
Yes. So for each of these colors, so the Pine Canyon, Barneys Canyon, Copperton Concentrator, and North Tailings Impoundment, they each have their separate bond and separate financial instrument in place. A key clause from the 1978 contract talks about our financial assurance associated with this contract. It states, the board, in lieu of accepting the posting of a bond or other surety, accepts the personal guarantee of the operator to reclaim the land affected in accordance with its approved reclamation plan. A written contractual agreement or personal guarantee was a permitted form of surety in 1978, and it remains a permitted form of surety today. But this surety, the surety associated with the 0002 permit, like I said, is mostly tied to the disturbance associated with the Bingham Canyon mine. So this slide gives kind of a brief timeline of how we've complied with our obligations under the 1978 contract. We're obligated to reclaim land according to our reclamation plan, in accordance with our reclamation plan, and we've done so throughout the years. We've engaged in numerous reclamation projects that have returned mine-impacted areas to wildlife habitat, and we've partnered with agencies, including DOGM, EPA, and the state, in these projects. So I want to just kind of talk about many of these projects in more detail. So you can see, I mean, going through the projects, you have the Bingham Creek tailings, you have the Lark tails and waste rock, the evaporation ponds, Barneys Canyon mine. It goes through many of these reclamation areas that we were discussing on the disturbance area map. So Rio Tinto purchased the Bingham Canyon mine in 1989. And immediately they began working with the state and with the EPA to clean up historic mine areas, historic areas that have been impacted by historical mining activity. They cleaned up multiple sites, even those not generated by Kennecott operations. One of these sites was the Bingham Creek Tailings area, where early lead miners had impacted areas with tailings, with waste rock, with slag, and some of these areas, some of these impacted materials had washed down into the Bingham Creek area. So we partnered with the EPA, and so in agreement with the EPA, we undertook the alternative Superfund approach to clean up the Bingham Creek tailings. And this alternative Superfund approach was developed because of our efforts, and because of our efforts to clean up these properties that were impacted by early mining activities. The Lark tailings and waste rock area is another example where we removed waste generated by an unrelated company. In 1993, from 1992 to 1994, we removed nearly 2 million tons of waste rock and tailings material. This material, it contained lead from historic mining operations near Lark. We completed the final stages of reclamation in 1994 and returned the area to wildlife habitat. In each of these, you can, I mean, obviously, you can see the before and after photos. In 1994, we addressed a number of evaporation ponds. 25 evaporation ponds were located between the mine and South Jordan City. These evaporation ponds held flows diverted from mining operations. In 1994, we moved material from the ponds to permitted repositories and to the waste rock disposal areas. We excavated pond sediments and placed them in a 200-acre on-site repository. And then in the mid-90s, we began exploring opportunities for development on much of our property. This former evaporation site was a prime location for development. And so we furthered the reclamation on the site. We removed the waste repositories, placed them up in waste rock disposal areas, and we created the Daybreak development that you see here. Daybreak was designed as a model of environmentally and socially responsible growth, and it remains a great residential development today. In Barneys Canyon mine, we implemented waste rock reclamation. The waste rock was segregated by sulfide content. Non-sulfidic material was moved to oxide waste rock repositories. The sulfidic material was moved to sulfide waste rock repositories. The areas were capped with a thick store and release cover. The area was vegetated and provides valuable elk habitat today. Between 1996 and the early 2000s, we undertook a number of demolition activities and reclaimed the associated land. For the North Concentrator, we demolished these structures. We removed structures to at or below grade. We recovered and recycled asphalt from parking areas and roads that were no longer needed. We removed below-grade concrete, and we reclaimed the land to habitat. 20 acres were reclaimed associated with the North Concentrator. Another 20 acres were reclaimed associated with the Arthur Mill. Just like the North Concentrator, structures were removed to at or below grade, and the area was returned to wildlife habitat. 110 acres were reclaimed with the Bonneville Crusher. Structures were removed to at or below grade, and the area was returned to wildlife habitat. And as I mentioned, these projects took place between around 1996 to the early 2000s. Between 1998 and 2002, we reclaimed approximately 3,000 acres on top of the South Tailings impoundment. Initial vegetation efforts were successful. They helped us manage dust in the area, and we continue to monitor the vegetation on the South Tailings impoundment and provide reclamation enhancements today. Between 2006 and 2009, and up into 2012, we reclaimed areas in the lower Bingham Canyon. We constructed reclaimable landforms in Bingham Canyon, and then progressively reclaimed them and covered them with capping material, vegetated and reseeded. We planted thousands of seedlings, experimented with trees, shrubs, and grasses to find the best plants that would grow and thrive in these reclaimed areas. In the lower Bingham Canyon area, we would relax angle of repose slopes. 200-foot tall lifts were relaxed, and they were reclaimed to a slope of 2.5 to 1, which allowed us to place topsoil on the slopes, topsoil and growth media on the slopes, and then rip and revegetate the areas. The vegetation that was established helps minimize surface erosion, helps us manage stormwater runoff, and decreases infiltration. So another contract key clause associated with the 1978 contract is that we are obligated to spend a certain amount of money each year in reclamation, best available technologies, experimentation, and rehabilitation of the land. This amount is $50,1978. It amounts to just under $200,000 in today's dollars. So in addition to this, we're required to spend this amount. We're required also to give an accounting of this to the board and of our reclamation activities to the board. So in 2017, we had, associated with the 0002 permit, we had, our reclamation activities were mostly tied to two major reclamation projects, the East Waste Rock Reclamation Project and the South Waste Rock Reclamation Project. We spent approximately $9.86 million. This amounts to $2.7 million in 1978 dollars. So you can see we comply with our obligation of the 1978 contract. Another key clause is that we agree to provide the board and division annually a detailed reclamation report of what we've done in the preceding year. In 2017, our largest reclamation project was the South and East Waste Rock Reclamation Project. The most significant visual impact of mining in the community will be addressed by these reclamation projects. And like I said, they are the largest reclamation projects currently going on within the 0002 permit. You can see this is a view of the waste rock disposal areas as of August 2012. Some things to point out associated with these waste rock disposal areas: they don't grow vegetation because there's no growth, there's no topsoil on them. They're waste rock. But they're 1,000-foot dumps. They're at angle of repose. So you can't place topsoil on them, it'll just roll to the bottom. The South and East Waste Rock Reclamation projects help us address this issue. The idea is to the left in the schematic, you can see the legacy angle of repose waste rock slopes. They're steep, they're tall. We address this by placing additional waste rock in front of the legacy repose waste rock disposal areas. This waste rock that we place in front is also placed at angle of repose, but it's placed in steps. And so as we step it back, this allows us to regrade the waste rock at an acceptable reclamation angle. We regrade it to a slope of 2.5 to 1. This then allows us to place topsoil or growth media on top of the waste rock, which then allows us to revegetate and and seed and revegetate the slopes. You can see the concept. So in the photo to the right, you can see the legacy angle of proposed waste rock disposal areas. It's the kind of the yellowish, the older dumps. You can see the ruling at the top. And then at the bottom of it, you can see we've placed additional material in lifts, and we began regrading this material. The darker material that is placed, that's growth media that's being placed on top of the reclaimed surface. These photos further explain. In the photo to the left, you can see the legacy angle of proposed slopes. They're the yellowish, orangish oxide material that's on top. You can see the grayish, newer waste rock that is placed in lifts in front at the bottom. In the next photo over, you can see that the newer waste rock is regraded to an acceptable reclamation slope. And in the photo to the right, you see that growth media is placed on top of the regraded waste rock, and then this allows us to revegetate. So the concept of this project is that you take the visual impact of mining in the community, and eventually this project will address this with reclaimed slopes. Now, this is not what's taking place in 2017 or 2018, meaning we're starting this project, but these projects will take years to accomplish. Here you can see, so in blue, you can see the future reclamation associated with the East Waste Rock and South Waste Rock projects, reclamation projects, and how that further impacts the remaining disturbance, how it further mitigates the remaining disturbance associated with the 0002 permit. And here you can see just this is the disturbance that's really mostly is remaining associated with the 0002 permit, and this is how the project further mitigates the remaining disturbance. Another project, some other reclamation work that we undertook in 2017 includes some reclamation enhancements that took place on the South Tailings Impoundment. We reclaimed 11 acres on the east abutment, and we revegetated this acreage. We evaluated some reclamation enhancements trying to improve past reclamation efforts and the vegetation success associated with those efforts. And we've implemented a number of test plots and observation areas where we're trying to evaluate how the vegetation is succeeding, the success of the vegetation over time. Not related to the 0002 permit, but just part of the overall broader context. We wanted to talk a little bit about reclamation taking place also in 2017, but associated with the Barneys Canyon mine. So Barneys Canyon mine is governed under a separate permit, has a separate financial assurance associated with that permit, but we're currently reclaiming some remaining areas that are associated with that permitted facility. We're reclaiming the heap leach pad areas. So previously, past reclamation has addressed areas surrounding the pit, the waste rock disposal areas, but the heap leach pad areas continued in operation until about 2014. These heap leach pad areas are undergoing reclamation as we speak. Reclamation associated with these areas includes demolition of facilities no longer being used. We are expanding the liners that are underneath these heap leach pad facilities. We're expanding the liners to allow us to regrade the heap leach pads, to reshape them so that they better fit in with the surrounding topography. And then these heap leach pads, we will cap them with an appropriate growth media and reseed and revegetate. So in 2017, work that we're undertaking, we're installed some of the liners associated with the heap leach pads. We've performed some buttressing of the pads, and we'll continue this work in 2018. The blue, just under the Barneys Canyon mine, is where this heap leach pad area is located, right adjacent to the Copperton concentrator, as shown in this slide. Another key clause from our contract, from our 1978 contract, says that we will establish an annual reclamation plan for each forthcoming year. We'll establish this with the board and with the division, and we'll consider some of the previous reclamation that we've done as we establish this reclamation plan. So proposed 2018 reclamation activities include continuing with the South Waste Rock and East Waste Rock reclamation projects. We're going to continue to relax the slopes. We'll cap with appropriate growth media. We'll vegetate some of the slopes. We've installed some test plots to help us evaluate vegetation success and appropriate vegetation methods. In addition, we will do, so outside of the 2002 permit, but still giving some of the reclamation context, we'll be doing some concurrent reclamation on the North Tailings impoundment. And this will allow us to reclaim as we build, and we'll also be performing some stormwater management. And then we'll continue the reclamation activities that we discussed associated with Barneys Canyon mine. So this is just the schematic associated with the South and East Waste Rock projects that we discussed, and then some of the work associated with the Barneys Canyon heap leach closure project. Finally, kind of in addition, we're doing a number of studies up at Rio Tinto Kennecott. A lot of these studies are cutting edge. In this particular study, or studies like this, we're evaluating how waste rock areas evolve geochemically over time. We're interested in things like oxygen and moisture content, understanding how it impacts the waters that are tied up in the waste rock disposal areas, and how these waters and associated material behave.
Thank you, Trevor. So in conclusion, Rio Tinto Kennecott is meeting its contractual obligations, most often far exceeding those. And we're doing that through our philosophy of proactive concurrent reclamation, which significantly reduces the reclamation liability.
Any questions?
Thank you very much. Board members, any questions? We'll start on the left.
Excuse me. First of all, I want to congratulate you on what you've been doing. We had the opportunity to go out and look at it several years ago, and it's wonderful to see. Second, I just had a question on what heap leach is. I've never heard of that. I hadn't seen that. What does that do? What is it for?
So the heap leach areas they're kind of like ponds, lined ponds with waste rock, with ore material placed in heaps on top of the ponds. And the idea, they're often tied to gold mining activities where you...
Lined ponds.
Mine ponds.
Lined.
Lined ponds,
Yeah,
yes.
so that's the key part of it. It's a lined, there's a liner underneath the heap of material.
Yeah, so essentially you sprinkle a solution over the material that's heaped up over these lined ponds. The material percolates down through the ore. It gets collected by the liners in the ponds and then is conveyed to appropriate processes that can then extract gold out of the solution. And then the solution, the pregnant solution, the gold is extracted out of the pregnant solution. The barren solution then is recycled, and it's a recycled process that you just recycle the solution over these heap leach pad areas. At the Barneys Canyon mine, those operations ceased around 2014. And so now we're reclaiming those areas.
Carl, any questions? Okay, we'll start with you. Keep going.
Go back one slide, please. And I just wanted to ask a question about the, I'm sorry, one more. The drilling operation there. Are you actually drilling into the waste rock or tailings in that picture?
Yes. Yes, we are. So we've installed a number of holes, very deep holes, and I don't have a lot of the details associated with the studies, but they've been cutting edge in terms of the kind of information that they've gathered as it relates to how these waste rock disposal areas behave over time. It's been very interesting to understand how the oxygen ingresses into the waste rock disposal areas, how much it diffuses down inside, and how that affects the drainage that comes out of these waste rock disposal areas. It's given us tremendous amount of insight, even into how we place the material in the waste rock disposal areas, how placing the material can affect how the water will behave after the material is placed. So it'd be things like you have large grain material, so large boulders. Typically when a haul truck dumps material, the larger rocks will fall to the bottom and the smaller rocks will be stuck up top. That affects how oxygen ingresses into the waste rock disposal areas.
It looks like all the permanent, or not permanent, but your generators and your drill rig are sitting on some sort of liner for catching the potential oil and grease drippings.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. Gone to that effort.
Have you struck any oil down there?
I'm not allowed to disclose. No, I'm just joking.
Are they? What kind of drilling apparatus are you using there? Is that an auger rig, or I can't really tell.
In this particular photo, I couldn't tell. I wasn't in charge of the drilling activities. If it's something you're interested in, we could get information.
It's a workover rig.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike, any questions from you? Hey, Gordon, any questions for you? Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate that. We're going to break with tradition here a little bit. Normally we get public comments at the very end of our hearings, but if someone is here that wants to address us on this issue, we invite you to come forward at this time. There's a mic, and then we'll reserve public comment on other issues to the end of this briefing session. Would you please identify yourself, give us your address, and speak closely to the mic, very closely.
Gotcha. And my voice is a little gravelly. My name is Morley Cox. My wife is Jeannie Cox. She is a royalty mineral rights holder on 153, which is going to be addressed in the next hour, as well as 154, which is coming up.
This is on this issue, Kennecott Mine. So if your comments are not on the Kennecott Mine.
I thought you were making the general.
No, this is specific to this Kennecott Rio Tinto presentation.
The end of the meeting, will you have an opportunity?
If your comments have to do with a docketed agenda item, we'll hear those then at that time.
Goes beyond that.
Yes, at that time.
No, but I mean,
you'll still get your chance. Don't worry about that. But it's not what we're asking right now is just who is here on this issue.
Thank you.
Seeing none, then we will say thank you very much for that comprehensive multi-year presentation. That's very helpful. The next agenda item, we'll go back to you, Mr. Baza.
Very well. I just wanted to add that at any time, the division staff stands ready to answer any board questions regarding how division interactions are going with Rio Tinto. So please let us know if you have specific questions about what the division is doing at any particular time. The next item on our agenda is legislative update, and this is something that we track continuously through the legislative session. The legislative session adjourned on March 8th at the end of the day, and when I say the end of the day, those of you familiar with legislative process know that they conclude their business when the bell strikes midnight on the 8th of March, so they go right up until that moment in time. But as we look at what transpired during the legislative session, the three bills that we were monitoring most closely were Senate Bill 191, which was addressing some county and city and municipality overlap between what the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining does. And so it was to clarify that jurisdictional overlap to some degree. It was passed and the governor signed that into law on March 26th. I don't believe that that bill requires any additional rulemaking. I think it is pretty clear from the statute what is allowed by both the division and the counties. And by the way, the amendment of law that came about by that bill was both in the statement of jurisdiction for the counties in their governing statute, and also in the governing statute for oil, gas, and mining. So it showed up in both places, so hopefully both the counties, municipalities, and the state will be able to see those changes in both areas. The next bill that was of interest to us was House Bill 267, presented by Representative Chu. This was a bill that was going to modify operator responsibilities related to surface owners in split estate situations. The bill was discussed in committee on the very last day that they had committee hearings. It was explained very well by the representative and by those in attendance at that hearing, but in the end, it did not pass through the committee. And what I think is going to happen with that is Representative Chu has indicated he would like to see that placed on interim study during the interim and possibly come back with some modified language in the next year's legislative session. And then the last bill we were watching closely was one introduced by Representative Handy. It was a expansion and clarification of the 2017 Senate bill that addressed compulsory pooling matters that this board has responsibility for. And it was to help clarify the responsibilities and the process related to compulsory pooling. That one did pass through both chambers, and the governor signed that one into law on March 19th. Just like last year, it did require a bit of rulemaking. I'm thinking it might require some again, but we'll work with the board's counsel and see what is necessary and try to make that happen as quickly as possible. Other than that, there are probably a lot of other items on the list that the division was monitoring, but none that specifically impacted our business, either at the board or division level. So with that, I'll try to answer any questions. There might be some things that I am not aware of, but if I don't have the answer today, I'll certainly look for it and let you know.
Hey, board members, any questions?
Just one bookkeeping question, Mr. Baza. What was the bill at the last? What was the bill number of the last one you described to us?
The one on compulsory pooling, that was House Bill 419.
And we're going to have a discussion about that later, and we'll have copies of those bills for you. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Any other questions from any other board members on legislation? Thank you.
Okay. We've provided you with copies of next month's agenda and division calendar. The one thing I would point out to you is in April, on April 12th, our normal Uinta Basin Oil and Gas Collaborative meeting has been ramped up to be called Uinta Basin Hydrocarbon Conference. We're helping to organize and sponsor that. We've got a slate of speakers. We'll go from 9 o'clock in the morning. It'll include both breakfast and lunch, and we should be adjourned by no later than 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Our board chairman is going to be moderating a panel on horizontal drilling. So I know that several staff members are traveling out the day before, in order to get set up for that. It's going to be streamed again, just like board hearings are, through our YouTube channel. So if you're unable to attend, you're certainly welcome to watch the proceedings on YouTube. But there is a registration link we have for that. If you are interested in attending, let Natasha or me know, and we'll make sure that you get signed up on the registration link. There's no cost to it, but we do need a head count in order to provide the meals for the day. So please let us know on that.
These have always been, just a comment from me, these have always been excellent. They've talked about produced water. They've talked about waxy crudes. They've talked about, but this one will be a much more in-depth discussion. It will include company presentations. And so if your schedule would allow you to attend this one, this was going to be a crackerjack presentation and a great day. It's a half a day. You also get to see the new Duchesne County, what do they call it, complex? Convention Center. So I just would encourage that. I think it's going to be an excellent event. I think Susan and I are planning to go. Depending on what my schedule, Susan, I may be able to go together. Otherwise, I may encourage you to go with the division. I'm going to be caught up for the rest of the day. Just so you know, I'm going to try and go out on that day.
What was the date again?
April 12th. After that, I'm going to go out and meet with some of the landowners.
Okay.
And on that House Bill 267, Gordon, you're more than welcome to join me if you're available, and find out what exactly is going on and what some of the concerns are.
Okay. Mr. Hanson, along the lines of that April 12th date, they are starting breakfast and registration check-in at 8 o'clock in the morning. In terms of long-range planning for the board, I'd like to mention that we are looking right now at, in June, as part of the board hearing in June, conducting a field trip to the Delta area to see the Magnum project. John Rogers is coordinating that. And I think when you get down there, you'll see that it has become quite an energy and mineral hub. Not only have they had the power plant and the beryllium mine that have existed for quite a long time, but the Magnum project has kind of created a new level of activity down there that is worth seeing. So that would be the day before the June board meeting. I think we're looking at Tuesday, the 26th of June, and then holding the hearing in Delta on June 27th. So please mark that on your calendar, and if you have other things that would be of interest in the area that we might want to do as part of a field trip, please let us know, and we're happy to accommodate that. Farther on down the road, you heard from Rio Tinto this morning in their annual report. They would be very eager to show the board what these activities look like on the ground that they're talking about, the reclamation activities. And we're looking at either late summer or into the fall to do that kind of trip. It would just be a day trip, but we wouldn't have the hearing elsewhere. It would still occur in Salt Lake City, but we would probably do that field tour the day before the hearing in either August, September, October, somewhere in that time frame. But we'll give you more details on that as it gets closer.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that's all I had for briefing this morning. I know you've got an item on the formal agenda to be discussed, and then this, after you adjourn for the day, we'll be doing our discussion of the Environmental Excellence Award nominations, as part of a working luncheon, and we'll look forward to sharing thoughts with you on those nominations that have been received.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the board for Mr. Baza? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very
Director.
much.
We will now open up for any input from the public on any issue that is within our jurisdiction, reminding you that if it's an agenda item for today, we'll accept your comments during the agenda item. Is there anyone here that would like to make a comment in general? Please come back up. Again, give us your name and your address, and speak closely into the mic.
Can do. My name is Morley Cox, address 1199 Cliffside Drive, Logan, Utah, 84321. My wife is here, Jeannie Cox, mineral rights holder. We're also landowners out in Duchesne area, Bluebell area. Our concern is one of getting adequate notice. It started in February. We got a division order to sign on a well we didn't know had been drilled on property that she has mineral rights under. That was section 25. Let's see, it was either 22 or 2325, drilled by Axia. The well was actually, I think, drilled in November, went into production. We didn't see an order until February, with no prior notice of the meetings that preceded the drilling of the well. We talked to them about, my major concern was the royalty factor correct. We talked to them, and since Bill Barrett had drilled 2 stand-up wells, we could see that the number was properly comparable for the horizontal well to the stand-up wells. That issue, but notice still was lacking. We then got, on the 18th of February, we got a letter from Axia with another order to sign, this time out of section 29. We call it the -22 ghost well because I went to the website to find out what its production was, and it wasn't there. So I came down and talked to Julie, secretary of the board, for about 2.5 hours about 2 weeks ago. She was extremely helpful. She went into the file and dug up the information on that well, and it had gone through. And again, one of my concerns was we hadn't received notice of the board hearings. The well was drilled, I believe, went into production in July of 2017. We didn't get our division order until February the 18th to sign. Julie went into the file and she pulled out the filing that was associated with the pooling. And apparently there was an appendix presented which has the owner information in it, which we used to see in a different form from EP Energy all the time, but she pulled out the pooling document, and the service was not made to the royalty holders in general. So when Julie provided that information to me, we found that we had family members in Section 29 that had leases with EP Energy. My wife and one other family member signed up with Crescent Point. They were listed in the detail, but again, we weren't given the prior notice. What was fascinating about the detail was that the leases were inconsistent in terms of other properties that were listed in association with that lease. 3 of the family members were noted as having property rights in an adjacent, in a close by Section 18, in 1-3-34, and one other one. My wife's lease with Crescent Point had no 18 on it. And the 18, the Section 18 information was inconsistent. So I went, on Friday, I went out to the recorder's office in Duchesne County and spent a day. In fact, I purchased the complete book from 1930, whatever it was, to 2014 of everything that had been recorded in Section 18. In going through it, discovered 2 probate-type documents which documented the family's ownership. But that's a section that oil's never been drilled in before, and so what happened between the 30s and today, which is like 80 years, is that mineral rights out there seem to have been used as collateral during the Depression when people didn't have money, and so there's a lot of mineral right holders in addition to the family, and the family owned everything that the Indians didn't own to begin with. So it's kind of a fascinating one, but I think that because nothing was ever drilled, the family, the one deed I found was not one that people remembered, or it was actually issued in '76 to my wife. At that time, her younger brother, who's on the lease, was only 16. And it appears that the family, realizing nothing had been drilled on the property, simply filed it wasn't a will, it was just a deed that deeded the property to the various family members. And it appears that maybe Axia was a little bit cart before the horse, that when I talked to the division people here, they made some phone calls and indicated that one of the reasons we hadn't been given a division order was that there was a lot of probate issues out there, which I suspect is really true. And I've since talked to Crescent Point, and they're looking for a whole bunch of family relatives, not in my wife's line, with the name of Goodrich, trying to figure out what really is out there. But I really thought that all that was supposed to be done before the pooling order was issued, so that we knew who was going to be force pooled and who was not going to be force pooled. So a little concerned about getting the information in a timely fashion. The one you're going to discuss in the next hour, we did get noticed of, and the listing is a list of names, but it covers 32 sections, and my wife has either property or leases on other sections in about 13 of those sections that are covered by the 32 on the well. But there are holes in that. There are about 3 sections where wells have never been drilled before. There's 1 section where they have been drilled. My wife, per the deed, has ownership interest. We have no knowledge of her ever being paid on the 2 wells that were drilled in it. So we're very concerned about what's going on in the landman activity of defining who is entitled to notice, but just putting a name down for a group of like 36 sections is not adequate disclosure to us, because we know there are holes out there. In 2310, we know her parents owned it. I've traced a document that declares what the various family members had interest in 10. 2 wells have been drilled on it, no knowledge that we've ever been paid for, and we would hope that as Axia proceeds that they would have done the landman stuff to worry about that, to worry about Section 15, to worry about Section 18, to worry about Section 1. There's at least 4. We've been working with the Axia people. They agreed to release payment from the July through February time period. We got that check before she signed the order, It was issued, we received it after she signed the order, but that's been sent in on the Section 29. But associated with it was another well that she's getting paid on in Section 27. We never received any notice of it. We have no family records that say she even owns property in Section 27. And so now we're worried about, have we signed up and received payments for the first 3 months? That well went into operation in November, and we've now received payment for 3 months that she may owe back because she doesn't own property there, best we can find out. But if they're not going to present the detail, this is the level of detail out of Section 29's appendix, which was available here on the 1st of February before they even went to pooling. They had the names of everybody that was here, and we didn't get notified on 29. We don't know what's going on in Section 27 because I haven't had time to even dig into that one yet. And we know there's holes other places, so we're here today. I'm just speaking for her because I'm not a royalty holder, but since this is a public meeting, anyone can talk. Don't know what's going to happen in the next hour because I'm the one doing the research and she is the holder, so I hope that I'm allowed to just for a minute express my concerns in her behalf. If not, maybe we'll get her to do that.
Okay. One of the things that's very critical to this board is that the public and particularly the landowners receive notice of the hearing. So as for the title out there, I will just tell you that my mother's first boyfriend was a gentleman named Glenn Goodrich, and I think that's probably part of the family. So
yeah.
And that's where I'm from, and I know the title out there.
Well, she's a Seeley and a Goodrich.
Is a challenge. So I think the board would really like, at least I would, like to get a report of if there is a defect in the title, why that occurred, or is it an issue where the chain of title has gaps or something like that would be a difficulty, but the notice part of it is very important. So could we ask the division to look in and meet with this gentleman to do that?
We've been meeting.
Right now on that issue?
Say again?
Would you like me to address the board on that issue right now?
If you're prepared, yeah, please do. And yes, please do.
I've had 2 discussions in which he's already been involved, so we're happy to have his participation.
Or if you want to just give us a written response, either way, you decide.
Very brief, and Mr. Cox has been in to meet with us many times, and we've discussed, and really the issue, we gave him names and numbers of people to meet with at Axia, right. And to my last conversation with him, he was yet to contact them. Is that correct?
No, we've been in contact not only with Axia, we've been in contact with Crescent Point and Crescent's Point Landman in particular, and we're moving down that path. But my concern is we just like to get notice in advance of the meetings, and that's really, in our mind, has not been happening.
Well, our last conversation, you said you had not. So since then, you have been in contact with Axia.
That's correct.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yep.
So we feel that the issue's there from them to straighten out their lease agreements and their title work and that. It's not something we have access to or the ability to do. So I just didn't know he told me he wasn't going to contact them at that time. So I'm glad. Would you get your answers from them?
Well,
let's do this. Let's invite you back in a month or two.
We'd be glad to come back.
To kind of give us a report of the quality of the notice you are receiving, feedback on how it's working. It's an issue that we're very interested in, making sure that it works. So we'll go down that road.
Could I just mention one other thing?
We are out of time, but if you can do it in 1 minute.
Yeah. When I talked to Crescent Point, they sent us the 154, which is going to be coming up, I guess, because we did get notice on it. That is, we didn't get notice. We got the copy of the document. I talked to the attorney, and he threw me a curve. I said, why are we even there? Because we don't know that we have any land in those sections. And he said, well, we tend to over advertise. That is, we want the notice to be complete. So what they're doing apparently is not only giving notice to the royalty holders in the affected land, but for a mile around the affected lands. Now, I don't know whether that's policy or not.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why it's so interesting. We've asked them to over notify.
Well, okay, but my concern is that now they got everybody stirred up thinking their land is involved. We're not sure that we have any property there. So when they put the notification list together, it would be helpful if they separated the two sets of parties, because otherwise the landowners all around who don't own land are perhaps being given the impression that they're somehow involved, that maybe they have land in there that they don't know about. So
that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
When you're dealing with that, I think that's an issue, works both ways for the royalty holder and the non-royalty holder. They ought to be separate lists so that everyone knows what they're being noticed about.
Why you're being notified.
Absolutely. Appreciate that.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Anyone else like to address the board? Seeing none, then we're going to start late. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back about 20 minutes after 10. Thank you. Is that right?